I did not give this show the proper credit that it deserved the first time around. Yes, I gave it a glowing review of an episode that I really like. This is because I think that The Amazing World of Gumball is one of the smartest shows ever written. That doesn't mean that I find it one of the best shows ever made, or it's one of my absolute all-time favorites, but I do find it exceptionally clever. Have you ever heard the term, "it knows what it is," being used as a defense for a TV show or a movie of mediocre or even bad quality? It's usually applied to your latest horror jump scare fest, or your latest gross-out comedy, or just the latest entry in the latest string of a franchise. It's a work of fiction that doesn't try anything new and just follows the beats that expected. I get the appeal of that defense. Knowing what you're making is pretty much a requirement to make a good product. What does this thing think it is? I don't know. Does it think it's an insight to the average family of its audience? It's not. It's stupid. It's bullshit. It doesn't know what it really is or what it's trying to do. This episode forgot that it was from SpongeBob and thought that it was from a completely different show. But a lot of things that I've reviewed, quote-unquote, knew what they were, and managed to be even more terrible because of it. Mega Babies knew what it was. Teen Titans Go knows what it is. The Little Clowns of Happy Town knew what it is. Knowing what you are isn't always a defense for bad quality, especially when another kind of show that quote-unquote knows what it is can bring what it is to new heights. If I could describe The Amazing World of Gumball in one sentence, it is that it knows what it is. It's an animated sitcom centered on a family of talking anthropomorphic animals. It's the standard sitcom setup with the idiot father and the in-control to the point of neurosis mother, watching the kids that have hobbies that you've probably seen media kids have before. And unlike, say, Glenn Martin, Gumball knows this. You see, Gumball knows that it's a television show. It also knows that it's a cartoon, and it also knows that it's a sitcom. It knows that it's aimed towards kids, and it uses that knowledge to break out of the boxes that shows of similar setup frequently fall into. The Amazing World of Gumball revels in deconstruction, especially in its later seasons. For example, in one episode, the father Richard. He's fat and lazy and stupid and doesn't have a job. That's the way that each episode begins, and that's the way that each episode ends. So, what if one day, the character that never gets a job ends up getting a job?
Front lawn, and your father had a job as a pizza delivery guy.
Huh, that wasn't a dream. That's what I just told you. And you fainted.
I guess I was just overcome with a strange new feeling.
What do you mean?
I think I'm proud. Of you, Richard.
Do you mean proud?
Yes, I think so. It's just, I'm not used to saying that word much, particularly to describe your father.
Something that is completely out of character. Well, the universe literally can't handle it, and it starts to implode on itself. It's actually a very clever meta-context. You ever wonder what happens to characters like Chuck Cunningham, who disappear never to be seen again with no explanation whatsoever? According to Gumball, it's because the universe itself has decided that they were a mistake, and has thrown them into a void and is slowly making everyone forget who they were.
Well, it's tricky. It almost closed. Yes, exactly. Well, that's, oh my gosh, it's closing! What? The world doesn't want you to escape! What are you guys doing? Well, I don't know. I thought using me would be a good idea. Dude, everything here's a bad idea. Do I have to spell it out for you? Hey, are you writing an email? Oh no, we gotta get out of here! We're in the world of disco!
From main characters changing voices to Gumball literally going through a rerun of the episode of the show, The Amazing World of Gumball takes every single convention about everything that it is, and it turns them on its head.
Yes! I'm sorry, but you
Oh, sorry. I said...
You shouldn't have pushed my buttons.
One question that I brought up many times in the past in these types of shows is, why are these two people married? They have nothing in common, their relationship is obviously unhealthy, and all they ever do is annoy each other. The only time that I ever get an answer is when it's because of circumstance, like the woman got pregnant. That isn't much of a problem in Gumball because quite frequently, even members of the family with contrasting personalities are on the same page, and are in deep agreement. But if they totally ignored this setup, then we wouldn't have my favorite episode of the show, the season 6 episode, The Choices. And yes, I'm reviewing another story and emotion-driven episode in a majority comedy series. But what can I say? Story really speaks to me, and it hits me in ways that other elements simply don't. It probably says something about who I am as a person, but that's the way that I feel. And as I've said before, comedy is really hard to talk about in a review context, without pointing out each of the jokes and basically picking apart why you should watch it, and destroying the point and enjoyability of why you should watch it. This episode begins at the Watterson household with an average family dinner. And by average, I mean that everything is chaos. The kids are being loud and obnoxious, and Richard is being, well, it's a sitcom. You can imagine how Richard is being.
Kids, please! It needs to be way louder to have any effect. We want food! We want food!
Was that really necessary?
But you work better under pressure. Anyway, I helped.
You were supposed to salt the potatoes, boil the carrots, and tenderize the meat, but instead...
It's okay if it's not perfect, honey. It's just nice to eat together for once.
This is actually good. It set up the tropes that the show is going out of its way to deconstruct. While doing this, risks your show or movie or whatever looking cliche if you do it too long. That's what happened in the first few episodes of BoJack Horseman. It's absolutely imperative to establish what you're deconstructing. The Amazing World of Gumball does this quickly and with good humor. Less than a minute and a half in, Nicole poses the question that sparks the rest of the episode. Why did she fall in love and marry Richard, the man who supposedly dragged her life into unadulterated chaos?
That was the moment I asked myself, how did it come to this? Where did I go wrong? That's it. It was the day I met him. I was on the way to the tournament with Mom and Dad.
Immediately in the past, they hit it off with a joke.
Talk about your report card.
But I got straight A's.
Not here. Gender.
Yeah, F because I'm female.
Being a girl is not an excuse.
Once again, I'm not going to go into all of the jokes because that would kind of ruin the point. But just know that even in one of their more story and emotion-driven episodes, they still nail the humor and come up with so many funny jokes. I don't think one of them misses its mark. The important part is that we see how Nicole's life was, and how obsessive her parents were in trying to make her accomplished. And we do see the effects of this in many other episodes of the show, with Nicole being rather neurotic sometimes and driving her kids beyond any reasonable means.
You're going to clean this place until it looks better than when you arrived. Then you will leave and never come back.
Or what?
What really elevates the scene to a higher level, and a lot of this episode in particular, is knowing the show of Gumball in a wider context. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that we've ever seen Nicole's parents on the show. Even though Richard's parents are very flawed people, we have seen them quite a few times. It's actually a really intense moment of show, don't tell, that gets deeper as the episode goes on. The car breaks down in a traffic jam, so Nicole has to run through the park to get to a martial arts tournament. This moment is a setup for future jokes, so there's not much to say about it. The main point is setting up all the titular choices. Throughout this episode, Nicole is going to debate the different directions that her life could have taken, which is a tricky thing to pull off. Not to spoil anything, but the other options don't work out very well. It's kept vague if this is realistic or just Nicole's fantasies, but that's probably for the better. If this was done poorly, it could have given the impression of Nicole being trapped and stuck in, debatably, and only debatably, the least of the bad situations, and making her life always destined to be shit. After running past a bunch of people, Nicole gets lost and comes across Richard, stuck in a log, and it's the moment that they began their relationship. However, she starts pondering the possibilities of a different life. They get the obvious one out of the way quickly, where everything goes as planned. She wins the karate tournament, follows her mother's plan, and becomes a dictator that brings on the apocalypse and gets overthrown rather quickly. Hope you like that glimpse of your future, Lois, because that's probably what you're gonna get, and you deserve every single second of it. Actually, that would be a pretty funny continuation of Malcolm in the Middle. Next, Nicole listens to the song of Banana Joe. Similar to Richard being stuck in the tree, this clumsy little thing attracts her to him, and the singing never stops, which drives Nicole insane. Nicole completely breaking down into banana rant is one of the funniest things that I've seen in quite a long time. Then she comes across Harold, who is a creep, and it ends up with the mansion catching fire and a miserable life. Next, she comes across someone who suggests using hugs as an alternative to modern medicine, which would result in her death. Then she swallows a butterfly, which results in her death. Then someone suggests she ride a motorcycle without a helmet, which results in her death. And finally, she comes across Richard, the only choice that remains. The two hit it off rather quickly. Richard asks the simplest questions to Nicole's overdrawn plans.
Why?
'Cause I have to fight.
Why?
Because I have to be the best.
Why?
So people will like me?
But lots of people already like you.
Really? Like who?
And that generally is the best way to put things into perspective. As they speak, it becomes too late for Nicole to get to her karate tournament. I don't want to go into every minute line of dialogue because we'd be here for days. And once again, this is something you should check out for yourself. The difficulty with the Admirable animations is that many of these things only have a stronger impact if you go in blind. However, one line that I do want to talk about and I think is really poignant is this one.
I mean, what should I do with my life?
Maybe start living it?
And I honestly think that that line is very important in this day and age. We all know people who continually work, getting all the overtime possible, that amounts to no reason in the end. Or they follow plans that others have laid out for them with no real planned payoff. They get an education and get a job that earns a lot, maybe start a family when that job isn't fulfilling them, because that's quote-unquote what they're supposed to do, and they end up getting existentially confused in a life that doesn't appeal to them. And for a good amount of balance, the episode does show the risks of following what you want to do and doing things for yourself. Nicole eventually ends up being forced to leave her parents. The rest of the episode is legitimately one of my favorite sequences in animation. It's like the opening of Last of the Star Makers, or the planetarium scene of BoJack Horseman, or the first 10 minutes of Up. Actually, a lot of this episode is kind of like the first 10 minutes of Up, but in reverse. It's gone as far as having the heart-rending music play over projector-style animation. They're really trying to capture the feeling of a short film here, and capturing the entirety of a life in a moment. The friendship blooms, but Nicole's parents want nothing to do with Richard, and Richard does repeatedly show himself to be an idiot that causes all kinds of comedic hilarity. It's actually kind of impressive with how the emotions aren't confused here. It's heartwarming, even though there are jokes, and these scenes are rather familiar, like the kiss in the car on the cliff. We've all seen this before. This is because the show only really resorts to jokes when it has to mix things up a bit. If this was just a straight story with no comedy whatsoever, it probably wouldn't work as well. Eventually, we see a young adult Nicole fed up with her parents, and she runs off. Only then does her mother seem to realize what she's been doing. And Richard's mother throws him out, which means that all the two have are each other. They start from the bottom in a small apartment by a train station, and their life together actually builds to something, which we can see in the present. They haven't been meandering, they've gotten somewhere. And that really does make a world of difference, at least to me. I've said it before that I cannot stand these shows where starting a family or whatever has just dragged your life into hell and destroyed all your dreams. It's just depressing and not very interesting anymore. After Nicole gets pregnant, the two decide that they should probably get married, which is actually really unusual for a kid's show. And Nicole's parents don't show up. And like I said, this episode is their first and only appearance thus far. Considering that this show is in its 6th season, and both of Richard's parents show up from time to time despite not being the best people, it really does say a lot of the pride and the emotions of these characters, all without uttering a word. I could go on, but this is something that you really have to see for yourself. When other shows have gotten to their 6th season, they tend to make episodes about infected splinters, or episodes about the characters peeling off a sunburn for 11 minutes, or adding a baby character that does absolutely nothing. It's kind of special that a show can not only be making good episodes this far in, but can still be improving and getting better this far in.